Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I've never told anyone this before, but I need to get it off my chest. It's been haunting me for years, a dark secret that I've buried deep inside. It all started with a catfish love story, but it twisted into something far more sinister. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college, and desperately lonely. I'd moved to a new city for a job and didn't know anyone. So, like many people in my generation, I turned to the internet for connection. I created a profile on a dating app, swiping left and right, hoping to find someone who sparked my interest. That's when I came across Ryan. His profile picture was of a handsome guy with piercing blue eyes and a charming smile. He was athletic, loved hiking, and had a witty bio that made me laugh. We matched instantly, and soon we were messaging each other nonstop. Ryan seemed perfect. He was kind, intelligent, and shared my love of books and movies. He listened to my worries, offered advice, and made me feel like I was the only girl in the world. We texted all day and talked on the phone every night. I fell hard and I fell fast. There was just one problem. Ryan always had an excuse for why we couldn't meet in person. He was traveling for work, or visiting his sick grandmother, or dealing with a family emergency. At first, I was understanding. Life happens, right? But as the weeks turned into months, I started to get suspicious. I tried to video chat, but his camera was always broken. I suggested meeting halfway between our cities, but he always had a reason why that wouldn't work. My friends warned me that I was being catfished. They urged me to do a reverse image search on his profile picture, but I was afraid of what I might find. I didn't want to believe that Ryan wasn't who he said he was. I was so invested in our virtual relationship that I was willing to ignore the red flags. Then, one night, Ryan sent me a message that changed everything. He told me that he loved me. Those 3 words hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd never felt so happy and terrified at the same time. I loved him too, I realized. Despite never meeting him in person, I was completely and utterly in love with Ryan. But I knew I couldn't continue like this. I needed to know the truth. So, I finally did a reverse image search on his profile picture. And what I found shattered my world. The picture of Ryan was actually a stock photo of a male model. My heart sank. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and foolish. I confronted Ryan, sending him a screenshot of the reverse image search results. He denied it at first, claiming that someone had stolen his pictures. But eventually, he confessed. He admitted that his real name was Ryan, and that the person in the profile picture wasn't him. He said his real name was Mark, and he was a lonely, insecure guy who lived in his parents' basement. He told me that he created the fake profile because he was too afraid to be himself. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't stop because he'd fallen in love with me too. I was furious. I screamed at him over text, calling him names and accusing him of being a liar and a manipulator. I wanted to hurt him as much as he had hurt me. But then, something strange happened. As I ranted and raved, I started to feel a strange sense of empathy for Mark. I imagined him sitting alone in his basement, feeling ashamed and desperate for connection. I realized that he was just as lonely and vulnerable as I was. So, I did something that surprised even myself. I forgave him. I told him that I was hurt and angry, but that I understood why he did what he did. I said that I still cared about him, even though he wasn't the person I thought he was. To my surprise, Mark was overjoyed. He thanked me profusely and promised to be honest with me from now on. He sent me a real picture of himself, a plain-looking guy with kind eyes and a shy smile. He wasn't the handsome Adonis from his profile picture, but there was something genuine and endearing about him. We started talking again, this time as ourselves. I learned about Mark's life, his struggles, and his dreams. He was a talented writer who worked a dead-end job to pay the bills. He was kind, sensitive, and had a great sense of humor. I found myself falling for him all over again, not for the fake Ryan, but for the real Mark. We talked for hours every day, sharing our deepest thoughts and feelings. We made plans to meet in person, promising each other that this time, it would really happen. And then disaster struck. One day, Mark told me that he was having trouble with his internet connection. He said that his parents were cutting off his access because they were tired of him spending all his time online. I offered to help him pay for his own internet, but he refused. He said that he would find a way to stay in touch, but that it might be difficult. A few days later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Mark. He told me that his parents had taken away his phone and his computer, and that he was only able to contact me using a borrowed phone. He said that he loved me and that he would do anything to be with me. He then asked me for money. He said that he needed $5,000 to move out of his parents' house and start a new life with me. He promised that if I gave him the money, he would come to my city and we would finally be together. I was hesitant. It seemed too good to be true. But I was so in love with Mark that I was willing to take the risk. I transferred the money to his account, hoping that it would be the start of our happily ever after. And that's when things took a dark turn. After I sent the money, Mark disappeared. He stopped answering my calls and texts. His social media accounts went silent. I was terrified. I thought something terrible had happened to him. I called his parents, but they said they hadn't seen him in days. I filed a missing persons report with the police, but they couldn't find any trace of him. Weeks turned into months, and still no sign of Mark. I started to fear the worst. Had he been kidnapped, murdered, or had he simply run off with my money and abandoned me? I was heartbroken and confused. And then, one day, I received a message from an unknown email address. The email contained a series of photographs. Photographs of Mark. In the photographs, Mark was torturing animals. Cats, dogs, birds, rabbits. The images were gruesome and disturbing. I was horrified. I couldn't believe that the kind, gentle man I had fallen in love with was capable of such cruelty. The email also contained a message. The message said, "If you want to see Mark again, come to this address alone." The address was a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of town. I knew it was a trap, but I couldn't leave Mark to suffer. I had to save him, even if it meant putting my own life in danger. So I went to the warehouse. When I arrived, the warehouse was dark and silent. I cautiously made my way inside, calling out Mark's name. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mark. He was covered in blood and holding a knife. He looked deranged and wild-eyed. "You came," he said, his voice raspy. "I knew you would." He lunged at me with the knife, and I screamed. I managed to dodge the attack, but he came at me again. We struggled, and I fought for my life. I eventually managed to overpower him, grabbing the knife and stabbing him in self-defense. Mark collapsed to the ground dead. I stood there, covered in blood, staring at his lifeless body. I had killed him. I had killed the man I loved. I didn't know what to do. I panicked and ran. I left the warehouse and never looked back. I never told anyone what happened. I buried the secret deep inside, hoping it would never come to light. But the guilt has been eating me alive ever since. I know what I did was wrong, but I don't know what else I could have done. I was trapped in a nightmare, and I did what I had to do to survive. I am not sure if I'll ever be able to forgive myself, but I needed to tell someone, even if it's just a stranger on the internet. I needed to confess my sins and release the burden that I've been carrying for so long. Maybe now I can finally find some peace. This is hard for me to admit, but I think I ruined a life, maybe more than one, all because I was lonely and pathetic. It started innocently enough, with a fake profile on a dating site. I was 38, divorced, and living alone in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. My ex-wife had run off with a younger guy from her yoga class, and I was feeling about as desirable as a used dish rag. I saw all these success stories online about people finding love on dating apps, but every time I tried to put myself out there, I got nothing but crickets. My profile was honest, maybe too honest. I wasn't particularly handsome, a little overweight, and my bio probably reeked of desperation. One night, after a particularly soul-crushing scroll through endless profiles of seemingly perfect people, I snapped. I found some pictures online of this ridiculously attractive guy. Chiseled jawline, piercing blue eyes, the kind of guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne commercial. I created a profile using his pictures, calling myself Chris. I made up a whole backstory. A firefighter, recently transferred to a station a few towns over, looking for someone to share his life with. I know it was pathetic, but in my head, It was just a harmless way to see what kind of attention I could get if I looked like that. The messages started flooding, and almost immediately. It was intoxicating. Women were actually interested in me, or rather, in the image I was projecting. I spent hours crafting witty responses, playing the part of the charming, heroic firefighter. It was like living a fantasy. And then I matched with Sarah. Sarah was different from the other women I'd been chatting with. She was smart, funny, and genuine. We had long, in-depth conversations about everything: our families, our dreams, our fears. She was a writer, working on her first novel, and I found myself completely captivated by her stories. I started to genuinely care about her, even though I knew it was all based on a lie. The problem was, Sarah wanted to meet. I kept making excuses: long shifts at the fire station, training exercises, family emergencies. The longer I put it off, the more elaborate my lies became. I told her I was dealing with a sick relative out of state, that I had to go away for weeks at a time. It was awful, but I couldn't bring myself to confess the truth. I was afraid of losing her. We talked on the phone almost every night, sometimes for hours. I deepened my voice, tried to sound more masculine, more like the guy in the pictures. I even started working out, trying to get in better shape, as if that would somehow make me worthy of her. I knew what I was doing was wrong, incredibly wrong, but I was addicted to the connection we had. Sarah made me feel alive again, like I was someone worth loving. After about 6 months of this charade, Sarah told me she was falling in love with me. My heart sank. I knew I couldn't keep up the lie forever, but I still couldn't bring myself to end it. I told her I felt the same way, knowing full well that I was trapping both of us in a web of deceit. Then, one day, she announced that she was coming to visit me. She'd booked a flight and a hotel near the fire station where I supposedly worked. I was terrified. I tried to talk her out of it, but she was insistent. She said she needed to see me, to be with me in person. I spent days agonizing over what to do. I considered confessing everything, but I was convinced she would hate me, that our connection would be shattered beyond repair. I even briefly entertained the idea of actually becoming Chris, getting plastic surgery, changing my name, moving to a different state. But that was just a crazy fantasy. In the end, I did the only thing I could think of. I pretended to be out of town. I told Sarah that I'd been called away on an emergency firefighting mission, that I wouldn't be able to see her. She was devastated, but she understood. Or at least, she pretended to. After she left, things started to unravel quickly. Sarah became distant, suspicious. She started asking more pointed questions about my job, my colleagues, my life. I could feel her pulling away, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she discovered the truth. Then, one night, I got a message from her that sent a chill down my spine. She'd found the real Chris online. She sent me a link to his Facebook profile, along with a single word: explain. I knew the game was up. I called her immediately, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I confessed everything. I told her about the fake profile, the stolen pictures, the lies, all of it. I begged her to forgive me, to understand that I never meant to hurt her. But Sarah was beyond heartbroken. She was furious, betrayed, and disgusted. She called me every name imaginable. She accused me of playing with her emotions, of leading her on, of shattering her trust. And she was right. I had done all those things. The worst part was, Sarah told me that she'd been planning to move to my town, to be closer to me. She'd even started looking for a new job. I had not only destroyed our relationship, but I had also derailed her life. After that, I didn't hear from Sarah for a long time. I tried to contact her, to apologize again, but she blocked my number and my social media accounts. I felt like the scum of the earth. A few months later, I saw an article in the local newspaper about a woman who had attempted suicide. The woman's name was Sarah. I was horrified. I rushed to the hospital, but they wouldn't let me see her. I waited in the lobby for hours, praying that she would be okay. Finally, a doctor came out and told me that she was stable, but that she was in a very fragile state. I never spoke to Sarah again. I left her alone, hoping she would eventually heal. But I know that I caused her immense pain, that I may have contributed to her mental health struggles. The guilt has been crushing me ever since. I know what I did was unforgivable. I used someone's image to lure in vulnerable women, and I ended up hurting someone deeply. I am disgusted with myself. I also learned that the real Chris, whose photos I stole, had no idea his identity was being used in this way. When the news broke about Sarah's suicide attempt and the catfish that led to it, people online started digging and discovered my fake profile. They tracked down the real Chris and bombarded him with messages, accusing him of being a heartless monster. His life was turned upside down because of my actions. He had to delete his social media accounts and move to a different city to escape the harassment. So here I am, years later, confessing my sins to the internet. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. I just hope that by sharing my story, I can somehow prevent someone else from making the same mistakes I did. Catfishing is not a harmless prank. It's a cruel and manipulative act that can have devastating consequences. I know this firsthand because I am living with those consequences every single day. I ruined Sarah's life, and I may have ruined Chris's life as well. All because I was too insecure and too afraid to be myself. I am a monster, and I will never forgive myself for what I have done. Okay, here goes. This is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to admit, even anonymously to the internet. It's a catfish love story, but I'm the one who did the catfishing. And it went way, way too far. It started innocently enough, or at least that's what I told myself at the time. I was 22, fresh out of college, living back at home with my parents, and utterly, miserably lonely. All my friends had moved away, chasing jobs and relationships, and I was stuck in my small hometown, working a dead-end retail job, feeling like my life had peaked in high school. I spent a lot of time online, mostly on forums and social media, trying to connect with people. I saw this ad for a dating site that was supposed to be for serious relationships only. So I figured, what the hell? I created a profile, uploaded a few, heavily filtered, photos of myself, and started browsing. That's when I saw her profile. Sarah. She was stunning. Long, flowing blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. Her profile said she was a writer, loved hiking and travel, and was looking for someone kind, intelligent, and adventurous. Basically, everything I wasn't. I knew I didn't stand a chance. I was average looking at best, worked at a mall, and the most adventurous thing I'd done recently was try a new flavor of instant ramen. But something about her profile drew me in. Maybe it was the sheer unattainable perfection of it all. So, on a whim, I created a fake profile. I stole photos from some random model I found on Instagram. I made up a name, Alex, because it sounded vaguely sophisticated. I fabricated a whole life. Alex was a freelance photographer, traveled the world for assignments, and volunteered at an animal shelter in his spare time. Basically, I created my ideal self, the person I wished I could be. And then I messaged Sarah. To my utter shock, she responded. She said she liked my profile, found my photos captivating, and was intrigued by my description of my adventurous lifestyle. We started talking, and I found myself getting sucked deeper and deeper into the lie. I spent hours crafting the perfect messages, researching photography terms, and Googling exotic locations so I could talk about them convincingly. I became Alex, the globetrotting photographer, the compassionate animal lover, the sensitive and intelligent romantic. Sarah and I talked for hours every day. We messaged, we emailed, we even started video chatting, using a combination of pre-recorded video loops and carefully angled lighting to hide my true appearance. I told her about my assignments in faraway lands, my encounters with fascinating people, my passion for capturing the beauty of the world. She told me about her writing, her dreams of publishing a novel, her struggles with writer's block. I fell in love with her. I know it sounds crazy, falling in love with someone I'd never actually met, someone who only knew a fabricated version of me. But I couldn't help it. Sarah was smart, funny, and incredibly kind. She saw something in Alex that no one had ever seen in me. Potential, worth, even love. The problem was, the longer it went on, the harder it became to maintain the charade. Sarah wanted to meet in person. She talked about planning a trip together, exploring some remote island paradise. I kept making excuses, citing conflicting travel plans, last-minute assignments, or sudden illnesses. The guilt was crushing me. I knew I had to tell her the truth, but I was terrified of losing her. I couldn't imagine my life without her messages, her voice, her virtual presence. So I kept delaying, hoping for a miracle, a way out of the mess I created. Then disaster struck. Sarah announced that she was coming to my city. She had a conference to attend and wanted to finally meet Alex in person. I panicked. I tried to dissuade her, begged her to postpone, even considered disappearing altogether. But Sarah was insistent. She said she couldn't wait any longer. She'd booked her flight and hotel, and she was arriving in 2 weeks. I was trapped. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, I came up with a plan. A stupid, reckless, and incredibly selfish plan. I decided to hire someone to impersonate Alex. I went online and posted an ad for a male model to play a role for a few hours. I offered a substantial amount of money, enough to attract some serious interest. I even specified that the actor needed to be able to convincingly portray a photographer with a passion for travel. I got dozens of responses, but one stood out. A guy named Jake. He was tall, handsome, and had a striking resemblance to the photos I'd been using for Alex. He was also surprisingly articulate and seemed genuinely interested in the role. I met Jake in person and explained the situation. I told him everything: the fake profile, the online relationship, Sarah's impending visit. He was understandably shocked, but after some convincing and a hefty down payment, he agreed to help me. We spent the next 2 weeks rehearsing. I taught him everything about Alex, his backstory, his interests, his mannerisms. I even gave him a detailed script of our conversations with Sarah, so he could answer her questions convincingly. The day Sarah arrived, I was a nervous wreck. I dropped Jake off at her hotel, gave him a final pep talk, and then drove away, feeling like the worst person in the world. For a few hours, everything seemed to go according to plan. Jake texted me updates, saying that he and Sarah were getting along great, that she was laughing at his jokes, and that she seemed genuinely happy. Then, I got a text that made my blood run cold. I think I'm falling for her. I called Jake immediately, but he didn't answer. I tried calling again and again, but he ignored my calls. I drove back to the hotel, frantically searching for them. I found them at a nearby restaurant, holding hands across the table, gazing into each other's eyes. I stormed into the restaurant, ready to confront them, but I froze when I saw the look on Sarah's face. She was radiant, happier than I'd ever seen her. I couldn't bring myself to ruin that moment, to shatter the illusion that she was finally with the man of her dreams. I turned around and walked away, leaving them to their fabricated romance. I never spoke to Sarah again. I deleted the fake profile, blocked her number, and tried to erase her from my life. But the guilt continued to haunt me. A few months later, I saw on social media that Sarah and Jake were engaged. They got married a year later, and now they have 2 kids. They seemed genuinely happy, living the life I had fabricated for them. I know I should be happy for them, but I can't help but feel a pang of jealousy, a sense of loss for the life I could have had. I destroyed any chance of a real relationship with Sarah, all because of my own insecurities and lies. I've never told anyone this story before, not even my closest friends. The shame is too overwhelming. I'm still living with the consequences of my actions, knowing that I created a fake love story that ultimately led to someone else's happiness, but at the cost of my own. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself, but I hope that by sharing this confession, I can finally start to move on, to learn from my mistakes, and to build a life based on honesty and authenticity, even if it means accepting that I'll never be the globetrotting photographer Sarah thought I was. I just hope that someday, somehow, I can find my own Sarah, someone who will love me for who I really am, flaws and all. And this time, I promise to be honest from the start. Okay, here goes. I need to confess something that's been gnawing at me. Something about a catfish love story that went way too far. It's not a murder confession or anything like that, but it still feels pretty damn awful. It's about how I created a fake online persona to get close to someone, and how it all blew up in my face, and hurt a lot of people in the process. It started during my senior year of high school. I was painfully shy, awkward, and basically invisible. I had a small group of friends, but I always felt like I was on the periphery, watching everyone else have exciting lives while I was stuck in my own little bubble. There was this girl, Sarah, who was everything I wasn't. She was beautiful, outgoing, popular, and incredibly kind. She was nice to everyone, even me, and I developed a massive crush on her. Of course, I knew I didn't stand a chance. She was way out of my league, and I was too afraid to even strike up a real conversation with her. I would just admire her from afar, hoping she wouldn't notice how pathetic I was being. Then, one night, bored and lonely, I stumbled upon this online forum dedicated to our town. People were posting about local events, school gossip, and just general chit-chat. An idea, a terrible idea, started to form in my head. I created a fake profile using a picture of some ridiculously attractive guy I found online, a stock photo model with perfect hair and a chiseled jaw. I named him Jake. I gave Jake a backstory. He was a new student, recently transferred from a private school in California. He was athletic, artistic, and, of course, incredibly charming. It was a complete fantasy, but it felt exhilarating to create this alter ego, someone who had all the qualities I lacked. Using the Jake profile, I started posting in the forum, participating in discussions, and making friends. I made sure to interact with Sarah, complimenting her posts and engaging her in conversations. To my surprise, she responded. We started messaging privately, and I found myself pouring all my insecurities and unspoken feelings into Jake. I was witty, confident, and engaging, everything I wasn't in real life. Sarah seemed genuinely interested in Jake. She shared her hopes, her dreams, her fears. She talked about her passion for photography, her love for animals, and her desire to travel the world. I was falling for her even harder, but this time, it was through the eyes of someone who didn't even exist. As Jake, I was everything she wanted. As me, I was nothing. The online relationship deepened. We exchanged photos, her of course, mine stolen. We talked on the phone, me using a voice changer app to sound more like the guy in the pictures. I know it's insane, right? I was creating this whole elaborate world built on lies, but I couldn't stop. I was addicted to the attention, to the feeling of being liked, of being wanted. And I was completely, utterly in love with Sarah. After a few months of this, Sarah said she wanted to meet in person. Panic set in. There was no way I could keep up the charade. The fantasy had to end. But I was so terrified of losing her that I did the only thing I could think of. I made up an excuse. Jake had to leave town unexpectedly. His family was moving back to California, and he wouldn't be able to see her. Sarah was heartbroken. I felt like the worst person in the world. I had built her up, given her hope, and then ripped it all away. But I convinced myself that it was better this way. At least she wouldn't know the truth about who I really was. I deactivated the Jake profile and tried to move on with my life. But the guilt was relentless. I couldn't shake the image of Sarah's disappointed face, the sound of her voice cracking when I told her Jake had to leave. College started, and I tried to reinvent myself, to become the person Jake pretended to be. I joined clubs, made new friends, and even tried to talk to Sarah when I saw her around campus. But she was distant, cold, and rightfully so. She probably thought I was just another awkward guy trying to hit on her, completely unaware of the pain I had caused. A year later, I was drunk at a party and feeling particularly self-loathing. I ran into one of Sarah's friends, someone who knew about the Jake situation. In my drunken stupor, I confessed everything. I told her about the fake profile, the stolen pictures, the voice changer, the whole twisted mess. I begged her to tell Sarah the truth, hoping that somehow it would make things better. The next day, I woke up with a massive hangover and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew I had made a mistake, a huge one. Sarah's friend told her everything, and Sarah, understandably, was devastated. She confronted me, and I didn't deny anything. I apologized, begged for forgiveness, tried to explain my twisted reasoning, but there was nothing I could say to undo the damage I had done. She called me pathetic, disgusting, and a liar. She said she never wanted to see me again. And then she walked away. The fallout was brutal. Sarah told everyone about what I had done. I was ostracized, ridiculed, and labeled a creep. My reputation was ruined. My friends distanced themselves from me. I became a pariah, and I deserved it. The worst part was seeing the pain I had caused Sarah. She was heartbroken, betrayed, and humiliated. I had shattered her trust and made her question everything she thought she knew about people. Years have passed since then. I've tried to make amends in small ways, volunteering at a local charity, donating to mental health organizations, trying to be a better person overall. But the guilt still lingers. I know I can never truly undo what I did, and I don't expect Sarah to ever forgive me. But I needed to confess this, to acknowledge the harm I caused, and to take responsibility for my actions. I was a coward who hid behind a fake persona to get close to someone I admired, and in the process, I destroyed her trust and shattered her heart. I hope that one day, Sarah can find it in her heart to forgive me, even if it's just a little bit. But even if she doesn't, I'll continue to carry this guilt with me, a constant reminder of the damage I can do when I let my insecurities and fantasies control my actions. This catfish love story taught me a painful lesson about honesty, authenticity, and the importance of treating others with respect. And it's a lesson I will never forget. It changed me forever, and it will haunt me forever. I've never told anyone this before, but I think it's time. Time to admit it, even if it's just to the faceless internet void. It's about a catfish, a love story, and how deeply I messed up. Not as the catfisher, but as the one who fell for it. See, most catfish stories involve someone preying on vulnerable people, building a fake persona to scam or emotionally manipulate them. My story is different. It's about how willingly, how desperately, I wanted to believe the lie. It started during my freshman year of college. I was painfully shy, awkward, and felt completely invisible. I spent most of my time in my dorm room, burying myself in books and movies. Social media was my only real connection to the outside world. I had a profile on this obscure online photography forum. I loved taking pictures, mostly nature shots and urban landscapes. I wasn't very good, but it was a creative outlet. One day, I got a message from a user named Alex_Wildlife. His profile picture was a stunning shot of a snow leopard in the Himalayas. His bio said he was a wildlife photographer, traveling the world capturing rare and endangered species. Intrigued, I clicked on his profile. His photos were incredible, breathtaking images of exotic animals in their natural habitats. Lions in the Serengeti, jaguars in the Amazon, polar bears in the Arctic. It was like National Geographic come to life. I messaged him back, complimenting his work and asking how he got started. He was surprisingly responsive. We started chatting regularly, at first about photography, then about everything else. He told me stories about his adventures, camping in the African bush, tracking gorillas through the jungle, dodging poachers in Southeast Asia. He was articulate, intelligent, and had a dry sense of humor that I found incredibly charming. He seemed genuinely interested in my life too, asking about my studies, my hobbies, my dreams. He was the first person who had ever made me feel truly seen, truly understood. I knew, logically, that it was strange to connect so deeply with someone online, someone I had never met in person. But Alex felt different. He was so genuine, so passionate about his work, so insightful about the world. We talked for hours every night, sharing our hopes, our fears, our vulnerabilities. He told me about his difficult childhood, his strained relationship with his parents, his struggles with loneliness. I opened up to him about my own insecurities, my social anxieties, my feeling of being an outsider. It was like we were two kindred spirits, finding solace in each other's virtual company. Of course, there were red flags. He always had an excuse for why we couldn't video chat or talk on the phone. He was in the field, he said, with limited access to reliable internet. He sent me photos of himself, but they were always blurry or taken from a distance. He claimed it was to protect his identity while working in dangerous areas. I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored the nagging doubts in the back of my mind. After a few months, our online friendship blossomed into something more. We started flirting, exchanging suggestive messages, and confessing our romantic feelings for each other. I fell hard. I was completely infatuated with Alex. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner: adventurous, intelligent, compassionate, and seemingly just as smitten with me. We made plans to meet up as soon as he returned from his current expedition in the Congo. I started counting down the days. Then, a few weeks before his scheduled return, I received a message from him. It was short and cryptic. He said he had gotten into some trouble with local authorities, accused of illegally photographing endangered species. He needed money for legal fees and bribes to get out of the country. He promised to pay me back as soon as he returned. It was a lot of money, several $1,000s. I didn't have that kind of cash readily available, but I was desperate to help him. I emptied my savings account, borrowed money from my parents, telling them it was for textbooks, and even took out a small loan. I wired the money to a bank account he provided, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. He thanked me profusely, promising to be back soon. Then silence. Days turned into weeks, and I didn't hear from him. His profile on the photography forum disappeared. His email address was no longer active. I tried to convince myself that he was still in trouble, that he would contact me as soon as he could. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had been catfished. Not just catfished, but scammed out of a significant amount of money. I was humiliated, heartbroken, and furious. I wanted to report him to the police, but I was too ashamed to admit what had happened. How could I explain that I had fallen for someone I had never met, someone who was obviously a fraud? How could I explain that I had willingly given him all my money? I was so embarrassed that I kept it a secret from everyone, my friends, my family, even my therapist. I just buried the pain and tried to move on, but the experience changed me. I became even more withdrawn and distrustful of people. I deleted all my social media accounts and vowed never to trust anyone online again. It took me years to start to heal. I eventually confided in a close friend, who was surprisingly understanding. She encouraged me to see a therapist and to stop blaming myself. She pointed out that I was vulnerable and lonely, and that the catfisher had preyed on my insecurities. It wasn't my fault that I had been deceived. But here's the thing. Even now, years later, a part of me still misses Alex. Not the person who scammed me, but the person I thought he was. The intelligent, compassionate, adventurous soul who made me feel seen and understood. I know it was all a lie, a carefully constructed persona designed to manipulate me. But the connection felt so real, so profound. I wonder sometimes if there was any truth to the things he told me, if there was any genuine emotion behind the fake facade. I know it's foolish to think that way, but I can't help but feel a sense of loss, a sense of mourning for a relationship that never existed. The worst part is knowing that I was so willing to believe the lie. I wanted to believe in Alex so badly that I ignored all the warning signs. I was desperate for connection, desperate for someone to love me, and I was willing to overlook any inconsistency or red flag to keep the fantasy alive. That's the part I'm most ashamed of. My own vulnerability, my own desperation. It's a confession that's hard to admit, even to myself. I wasn't just a victim of a catfish scam. I was a willing participant in my own deception. I wanted to believe in the impossible, and I paid the price for it. I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from this experience, but I hope that by finally telling my story, I can start to let go of the shame and the pain. Maybe, just maybe, someone else who has been through something similar will read this and feel a little less alone. And maybe, just maybe, I can finally forgive myself for being so naive, so desperate, so willing to believe in a love that was never real. Okay, here goes nothing. I've been carrying this around for nearly a decade, and the weight of it is starting to crush me. It's about love, or what I thought was love, and a whole lot of lies. This is my catfish love story, and it's way darker than any episode of that MTV show. It started in 2014. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college, and utterly clueless about life and love. I was living in my small hometown, working a dead-end job, and feeling incredibly lonely. All my friends had moved away, started their careers, and found significant others. I was stuck. So, like any desperate millennial, I turned to the internet. I signed up for a dating site, created a profile, and started swiping. I wasn't having much luck. Most of the guys in my area were either looking for hookups or were just plain boring. Then I stumbled upon a profile that stopped me in my tracks. His name was Alex. He was a photographer, living in Los Angeles. His profile pictures were stunning: landscapes, portraits, candid shots of everyday life. He was handsome, in that brooding, artistic kind of way. He had a witty bio that showcased his intelligence and his passion for art. I was instantly smitten. I messaged him, not expecting much. To my surprise, he messaged back almost immediately. We started chatting online, and it felt like we clicked instantly. We talked about everything: our dreams, our fears, our favorite books and movies. He was incredibly intelligent, sensitive, and funny. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just interested in my appearance. After a few weeks of chatting online, we exchanged numbers and started texting. Then we started talking on the phone. His voice was deep and soothing, and I found myself looking forward to our nightly calls more than anything else. He told me about his photography work, his struggles to make it in LA, and his complicated relationship with his family. I told him about my boring job, my small-town life, and my longing for something more. We were both searching for something, and we seemed to find it in each other. After a couple of months, Alex started hinting that he wanted to meet in person, but there was always a reason why he couldn't. He was too busy with work. He was traveling for a photography project. He was dealing with a family emergency. At first, I was understanding. I knew he was busy, and I didn't want to pressure him. But as time went on, I started to get suspicious. I suggested video calling, but he always had an excuse. His camera was broken. His internet was acting up. He was in a location with bad reception. Red flags started popping up, but I ignored them. I was so invested in this relationship, so desperate for it to be real, that I convinced myself everything was fine. My friends warned me. They told me I was being catfished. They urged me to do a reverse image search on his profile pictures, but I refused to listen. I didn't want to know the truth. I wanted to believe in Alex, in our connection, in our future together. Then, one night, Alex told me something that changed everything. He confessed that he wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't a photographer. He wasn't living in Los Angeles. He wasn't even named Alex. His real name was David. He was a 45-year-old man living in his mother's basement in Ohio. He had created the Alex persona using pictures he found online. He said he was lonely and insecure, and that he had never been able to connect with anyone in real life. He claimed that he had fallen in love with me, and that he couldn't bear to keep lying any longer. I was devastated. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and heartbroken. Everything I thought I knew about Alex, about our relationship, was a lie. I wanted to hate David. I wanted to scream at him, to curse him, to make him pay for what he had done. But I couldn't, because, as he confessed his lies, I realized I was lying too. See, I hadn't been completely honest with Alex/David either. I had presented a curated version of myself online, thinner, prettier, more successful than I actually was. I used filters on my profile pictures. I exaggerated my accomplishments. I downplayed my insecurities. I wasn't a complete catfish like David, but I wasn't entirely genuine either. And that's when the truly twisted part of our relationship began. Instead of ending things, we decided to be honest with each other, to reveal our true selves, flaws and all. David sent me his real picture, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a paunch. I sent him a picture of myself without makeup, without filters, without the carefully chosen angles. We talked about our insecurities, our vulnerabilities, our deepest fears, and somehow we fell even deeper in love. We both knew our relationship was unconventional, even bizarre, but we convinced ourselves that it was real, that our connection was genuine, despite the lies and the distance. For the next 5 years, we continued our online relationship. We talked every day, shared our lives, supported each other through thick and thin. We never met in person, but we swore we would someday. We made plans to travel, to start a life together, to finally be a real couple. But then, a year ago, David stopped responding. His texts went unanswered. His phone went straight to voicemail. His social media accounts went silent. I tried everything to reach him, but it was like he had vanished off the face of the earth. I panicked. I feared the worst. I imagined him sick, injured, or even dead. I contacted his mother, using the information he had given me years ago. She told me that David was fine. He had moved out of her house and started a new life. He had met someone in real life, a woman he worked with, and they were now engaged. He had asked his mother not to give me his contact information. He wanted to move on. I was heartbroken all over again. This time it was different. This time it was real. David wasn't just a fantasy, a figment of my imagination. He was a real person who had chosen someone else over me. I felt like I had lost everything. Not just a boyfriend, but a best friend, a confidant, a soulmate. The worst part is that I can't even grieve properly. I can't tell anyone what happened, because our relationship was built on lies and deception. I can't seek closure, because I don't even know where David is or how to contact him. So here I am, years later, still haunted by this catfish love story. I'm ashamed of my own lies, heartbroken by David's betrayal, and terrified of ever trusting anyone again. I don't know what the moral of this story is. Maybe it's that online relationships are inherently fake. Maybe it's that people are capable of anything, even the most elaborate deceptions. Or maybe it's just that I'm a fool for believing in love in the first place. I just needed to get this off my chest. I needed to tell someone, anyone, the truth about my catfish love story. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing my secret, I can finally start to heal. I will never look at online dating the same way again. The internet can connect people, but it can also create a barrier for true connection. Okay, here goes. I don't even know where to start, because the whole thing is so messed up. For years, I lived a double life online. Not like a secret agent kind of double life, but a fake identity, a catfish. I know it's wrong. I knew it was wrong then, but I did it anyway. It started pretty innocently. I was in my early 20s, freshly out of college, and feeling incredibly insecure. I was working a dead-end job, living in my parents' basement, and watching all my friends move on with their lives. They were getting married, buying houses, starting careers. I was stuck. I hated the way I looked. I was overweight, awkward, and had zero confidence when it came to dating. I tried dating apps, but the results were always the same. A few awkward conversations that fizzled out or, more often, complete silence. One night, feeling particularly pathetic, I stumbled across some old photos of a guy I went to high school with. He was everything I wasn't: tall, athletic, handsome. He had that effortless cool that I always envied. He was also completely off social media. It was weird. He wasn't anywhere to be found online. Maybe he wanted to stay private, which made me more curious. I don't know what possessed me, but I created a fake profile using his pictures. I called myself Alex, and I made up a whole backstory. Recent military vet, avid hiker, aspiring photographer. Basically, everything I wished I was. I know it's pathetic. I told myself it was just a temporary thing, a way to boost my ego and maybe chat with people online. I never intended for it to go as far as it did. Then I met Sarah. She messaged Alex on a dating site. She was beautiful, intelligent, and funny. We started talking every day, and I quickly became completely infatuated with her. I know it sounds crazy, falling for someone when you're pretending to be someone else, but it happened. We talked about everything. Our dreams, our fears, our families. She told me about her struggles with anxiety, her passion for art, her love for animals. I listened, truly listened, and I found myself caring about her more than I ever thought possible. The problem, of course, was that I was still Alex. I couldn't reveal my true identity without risking everything. So I kept up the charade, day after day, week after week. I became incredibly skilled at dodging her requests for video calls, claiming my camera was broken or that I had terrible reception where I was living, which, technically, wasn't a lie, since I was still in my parents' basement. I even went as far as creating fake scenarios where Alex was traveling for work, sending her pictures of random landscapes I found online. The guilt was constantly gnawing at me. I knew I was hurting her, leading her on with a lie, but I was also terrified of losing her. She was the first person who had ever truly seemed to see me, even if she thought she was seeing someone else. As time went on, our relationship deepened. We started saying, "I love you." We made plans to meet in person, which I always managed to postpone with some elaborate excuse. I was trapped in a web of my own making, and I didn't see any way out. Then, one day, Sarah told me she was moving to my city. She had gotten a job offer she couldn't refuse, and wanted us to finally be together. I panicked. This was it, the moment of truth. I knew I had to tell her the truth, but I was so scared of what she would do and what she would say. I imagined her reaction, the hurt, the anger, the betrayal. I didn't think I could handle it. I started distancing myself from her, hoping she would lose interest. I stopped responding to her messages as quickly, made up excuses for not being able to talk on the phone, and became generally emotionally unavailable. It worked, but not in the way I wanted it to. Sarah became increasingly insecure and started questioning everything. She asked me if I was still interested, if I was seeing someone else. I denied it, of course, but the damage was done. One night, she called me, her voice trembling. She said she couldn't do this anymore. The distance, the uncertainty, the constant excuses. It was too much for her anxiety to handle. She needed to know if I was truly committed to her. I choked. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, but I also couldn't lie to her anymore. So I did the coward's thing. I broke up with her. I told her I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, that I needed to focus on myself, that it wasn't her fault. All the standard breakup cliches. She was devastated. I could hear her crying on the other end of the phone. I hung up, feeling like the lowest scum on earth. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, imagining what it would have been like if I had just been honest with her from the beginning. I knew I had ruined any chance of a real relationship with her, but I also knew I had to do something to make amends, however small. I spent weeks trying to track her down once she moved, using public records, social media, carefully, so she wouldn't suspect it was me. Anything I could find, I finally found out where she was living. Then one day I wrote her a letter. A long one. I poured my heart out, explaining everything. The insecurities, the fake profile, the lies, the guilt. I told her how much I cared about her and how sorry I was for hurting her. I didn't expect her to forgive me, and I didn't ask for a second chance. I just wanted her to know the truth. I didn't sign the letter with my real name, but I included enough details about our conversations for her to know it was from Alex. I left the letter on her doorstep one night and then disappeared. I never heard from her. I don't know if she even read the letter, but I hope somewhere she understands why I did what I did, even if she can't forgive me. It's been years since then, and I still think about Sarah all the time. I often wonder if she is happy, if she ever thinks about Alex, if she will ever come to know who I really am. I never catfished anyone again. The experience taught me a painful but valuable lesson about honesty, self-acceptance, and the importance of being true to yourself. It's a lesson I wish I had learned sooner, before I hurt someone I cared about. I'm still ashamed of what I did, but I hope that by finally confessing, I can start to forgive myself and move on with my life. I wanted to come clean. I had to come clean. Okay, here goes. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to admit, even to myself. It's about a relationship I had, or thought I had, a few years ago. A catfish love story, but with a twist. I was the catfish. I know, it's awful. Believe me, I know. It started innocently enough. I was in a really low place. Just got out of a long-term relationship, feeling insecure, lonely, the whole shebang. I stumbled upon this online forum for people who loved a particular obscure science fiction show. I lurked for a while, then started posting occasionally. Everyone seemed so friendly, so passionate about this weird little show that I loved too. I created a profile, using a picture of someone I found online. I know, red flag number one. Her name was Sarah, and she was idealized. Long dark hair, striking blue eyes, the kind of girl I always wished I could be, but never was. In reality, I was just plain old me, living in my pajamas, eating microwave dinners, and feeling sorry for myself. In the forum, Sarah was witty, insightful, and instantly popular. People loved her takes on the show, her fan theories, her quirky sense of humor. And then I got a private message from him. His username was Sci-Fi Geek 87, and his name was Ben. He said he'd been following my posts and really liked my perspective. We started chatting online, just about the show at first, but then it evolved into deeper conversations about our lives, our dreams, our fears. I found myself pouring my heart out to him, hiding behind the anonymity of the internet and the fake Sarah persona. And he did the same. He told me about his demanding job as a software engineer, his strained relationship with his family, his love of hiking and photography. He was smart, funny, and incredibly kind. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. The problem was, he thought he was talking to Sarah, and Sarah was a complete fabrication. As the weeks turned into months, our connection deepened. We started talking on the phone, then video chatting. I used a combination of pre-recorded videos and creative angles to avoid showing my face directly. I even used a voice changer app to sound more like the girl in the photos. It was insane, I know. The deception was elaborate and exhausting, but I was addicted to the validation, the attention, the feeling of being loved, even if it was for someone who didn't exist. Ben was falling in love with Sarah, and I, in my own twisted way, was falling in love with him too. I knew it was wrong, that I had to end it, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was so afraid of losing him, of going back to being alone and invisible. So I kept up the lie, digging myself deeper and deeper into a hole of my own making. There were close calls, of course, times when Ben wanted to meet in person, and I had to come up with increasingly ridiculous excuses. I pretended to be traveling for work, visiting a sick relative, even claimed I had a rare medical condition that prevented me from being in public. He was always so understanding, so supportive, which only made me feel even more guilty. One day, Ben told me he was planning a surprise visit. He was coming to my city, and he wanted to finally meet Sarah in person. I was terrified. This was it, the moment of truth. The lie was about to crumble, and I was going to lose everything. I spent days agonizing over what to do. I considered ghosting him, disappearing completely, but I couldn't bring myself to do that either. I knew he deserved an explanation, even if it was a painful one. Finally, I decided to come clean. I wrote him a long, rambling email, pouring out my heart and confessing everything. I told him about my insecurities, my loneliness, my desperate need for connection. I explained how the Sarah persona had started as a harmless fantasy, but had spiraled out of control. I apologized for the pain I had caused him, for the lies I had told, for betraying his trust. I didn't expect him to forgive me. I didn't even deserve his forgiveness. I just wanted him to know the truth, to understand why I had done what I did. I hit send and then shut off my computer, unable to face the inevitable fallout. For the next few days, I lived in a state of anxiety and dread. I barely ate, barely slept, constantly checking my email and phone, waiting for Ben's response. When it finally came, it was short and to the point. He said he was hurt, angry, and confused. He couldn't believe that someone he had trusted and cared for so deeply could be so deceitful. He needed time to process everything, and he wasn't sure if he could ever forgive me. I understood. I didn't blame him for feeling that way. I had broken his heart, and I deserved his anger. A few weeks later, I received another email from Ben. This one was longer, more thoughtful. He said he had done a lot of thinking about what I had told him, and while he was still hurt, he was also trying to understand. He acknowledged that I must have been in a lot of pain to do what I did. He said he wasn't ready to resume our relationship, but he was willing to talk, to try to understand each other better. I was cautiously optimistic. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to salvage something from this mess. We started exchanging emails again, then phone calls. We talked about everything, my insecurities, his feelings of betrayal, the nature of online relationships, the complexities of human connection. It was difficult, painful at times, but also incredibly cathartic. I finally revealed my true self to him. I sent him pictures of me, without filters or editing. I showed him my real life, my flaws, my vulnerabilities. And he accepted me, not as the idealized Sarah, but as the flawed, imperfect person I actually was. To my surprise, Ben asked me to meet him, not as Sarah, but as myself. I was still hesitant, afraid of ruining the fragile connection we had rebuilt, but I knew I had to do it. I booked a flight to his city, and we agreed to meet at a coffee shop. I was terrified. I spent hours getting ready, trying to make myself presentable without looking like I was trying too hard. When I finally saw him, standing outside the coffee shop, my heart skipped a beat. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He smiled when he saw me, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We spent the next few hours talking, laughing, and getting to know each other for real. It was awkward at times, but also surprisingly natural. We talked about the past, about the lies and the hurt, but also about the future, about the possibility of building something real. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. There were bumps along the road, moments of doubt and insecurity, but we were both committed to making it work. We continued to talk and meet each other. Over time, we started dating again, but this time, it was different. It was real. We built a relationship based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. We learned to love each other for who we truly were, flaws and all. Ben helped me to see my own worth, to overcome my insecurities, and to embrace my true self. I helped him to open up, to express his emotions, and to connect with others on a deeper level. It's not your typical love story, but it's ours, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. We have been together for a few years now, and even though the scars of the past remain, we are now happy and moving forward. I will always feel guilty for what I did, but I am grateful that Ben gave me a second chance, and I am determined to never betray his trust again. So, why am I telling you all this now? Because I think it's important to share stories like this, to show that even the worst mistakes can be overcome, that even the most broken relationships can be repaired, and because I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others avoid making the same mistakes I did. Don't create fake identities online. Don't build relationships on lies. Be honest, be authentic, be yourself. Because in the end, the only love that truly matters is the love that is based on truth. This is harder than I thought it would be. It feels like admitting this makes it real, even though it's been gnawing at me for nearly a decade. I messed up, big time, in a way that still makes me cringe when I think about it. And it all started with a catfish. But not the kind you find in a lake. This was a catfish romance. Back in the late 2000s, before catfishing was a common term, I was a lonely college freshman, drowning in textbooks and crippling social anxiety. I wasn't having the college experience everyone talked about. No wild parties, no spontaneous road trips, no cute meet-cuties in the library. Just endless studying and the gnawing feeling that I was missing out. That's when I stumbled upon online forums dedicated to a band I loved. It was a way to connect with people who shared my interests, a small corner of the internet where I felt like I belonged. And that's where I met Ryan. Ryan was everything I wasn't: confident, funny, and seemingly effortlessly cool. He had a profile picture of some skater dude with tousled hair and a mischievous grin, and his posts were always witty and engaging. We started chatting privately, and soon, we were messaging each other every day. He told me about his life in California, his dreams of becoming a musician, his passion for skateboarding. I, in turn, told him about my mundane college life, my anxieties, my insecurities. He listened without judgment, offering advice and support that I desperately craved. He made me feel seen, understood, and, dare I say, special. The more we talked, the more I started to develop feelings for him. It was ridiculous, I know. I'd never even seen his face in real life, but his words resonated with me in a way that no one else has ever had. He seemed to get me, to understand my quirks and insecurities in a way that even my closest friends didn't. He built me up when I was feeling down, and he celebrated my small victories like they were his own. I was falling hard, and I knew it was probably a terrible idea, but I couldn't help myself. Then one day, he suggested we take things to the next level. He wanted to see me, to hear my voice. He asked me to video chat. That's when the panic set in, because the truth was, I wasn't exactly who I presented myself to be online either. I wasn't using my real picture. I was using photos of a girl I found on a stock photo website. She was pretty, effortlessly stylish, and everything I wished I could be. I told myself it was just a temporary thing, a way to feel more confident in the online world. But as my relationship with Ryan deepened, the lie became harder and harder to maintain. I knew I couldn't keep up the charade forever, but I was terrified of what would happen if I told him the truth. Would he hate me? Would he think I was ugly and pathetic? Would he disappear from my life forever? So I did the only thing I could think of. I panicked and doubled down on the lie. I made excuses for why I couldn't video chat. My webcam was broken. My internet connection was acting up. I was too busy with school. I even faked being sick a few times to avoid his calls. The more I lied, the more trapped I felt. The guilt was crushing me, but I was too afraid to come clean. Then, one day, Ryan announced he was coming to visit me. He said he had some time off from work and wanted to surprise me. My heart stopped. I couldn't let him see me. Not like this. So I did the unthinkable. I created a whole fake life for him to discover. I enlisted the help of my roommate, Sarah, who, bless her heart, agreed to play along with my crazy scheme. I told Sarah everything about the fake pictures, about my fears, about my feelings for Ryan. She was shocked and horrified, but she also understood how much I cared about him. Together, we transformed my dorm room into a shrine to the girl in the pictures. We printed out more photos, scattered them around the room, and even bought some of the clothes she was wearing in the pictures. I wrote fake journal entries in her handwriting, detailing our relationship and my excitement about his upcoming visit. I even created a fake social media profile for her, posting updates about our lives together. It was insane, I know, but I was desperate. When Ryan arrived, I met him at the train station, pretending to be the friend of the girl in the pictures. I told him that she was out of town visiting family, but would be back in a few days. I offered to show him around campus and keep him company until she returned. He was disappointed, but he seemed to take it in stride. He was just happy to be there, to finally be close to the girl he'd been talking to for months. For the next few days, I led him on a carefully curated tour of my fake life. I showed him all the places the girl in the pictures would supposedly hang out. We ate at her favorite restaurants, visited her favorite shops, and even went to a concert she would have loved. I acted as her translator, interpreting her thoughts and feelings for him. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, and utterly absurd. But I was determined to pull it off. Ryan was genuinely happy, enjoying his time in my town, and convinced that he was about to meet the girl of his dreams. The guilt was eating me alive, but I kept telling myself it was just a temporary thing, that I would confess everything as soon as he left. But then, on his last night, everything changed. We were sitting on a bench in the park, talking about our hopes and dreams for the future, when he turned to me and said something that shattered my carefully constructed world. He said he was falling in love with me, not with the girl in the pictures, but with me, the person he'd been spending time with for the past few days. He said he admired my intelligence, my humor, and my kindness. He said he felt a connection with me that he'd never felt with anyone else. My heart sank. I knew I couldn't keep up the charade any longer. I had to tell him the truth. But just as I was about to confess everything, he leaned in and kissed me. It was a gentle, tentative kiss, but it sent a jolt of electricity through my entire body. In that moment, all my carefully constructed defenses crumbled. I kissed him back, pouring all my pent-up emotions into that one kiss. It was a terrible, awful decision. We spent the night together. The next morning, I woke up next to him, filled with a mixture of guilt, shame, and a strange sense of euphoria. I knew I had to tell him the truth, but I was terrified of losing him. So I did the only thing I could think of. I ran away. I left a note on his pillow, saying that I had to leave unexpectedly and that I would explain everything later. Then, I packed my bags and went home, leaving him to deal with the mess I'd created. I never spoke to him again. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and tried to erase him from my life. It was cowardly, I know, but I couldn't face him. I couldn't face the consequences of my actions. I spent years haunted by what I did. The guilt followed me everywhere, poisoning my relationships and preventing me from truly connecting with anyone. I often wondered what happened to Ryan. Did he ever find out the truth? Was he hurt? Did he hate me? I never had the courage to find out. To this day, I still regret my actions. I regret lying to him, leading him on, and running away like a coward. I know I can never undo what I did, but I hope that by finally confessing, I can start to heal and move on. I know this doesn't excuse my behavior, but I hope it offers some explanation. I was young, insecure, and desperate for connection. I made a terrible mistake, and I've been paying for it ever since. I don't know if Ryan will ever read this, but if he does, I want him to know that I'm truly sorry. I'm sorry for lying to you, for hurting you, and for being such a terrible person. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, even if I can never forgive myself. And to anyone else reading this, please learn from my mistakes. Be honest with yourself and with others. Don't let fear and insecurity lead you down a path of deception. It's not worth it. The guilt will eat you alive. I know this is going to sound crazy, and a part of me still can't believe it actually happened. It's been almost 7 years, and the shame still claws at me. I need to tell someone, anyone, even if it's just into the void of the internet. It started, like so many things do these days, with a harmless online game, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG, to be exact. I was in my early 20s, working a dead-end job, and feeling generally lost and unfulfilled. This game, Ethereal Kingdoms, offered an escape, a chance to be someone else, to explore a world of magic and adventure. I created a character, a powerful sorceress named Lyra, and threw myself into the game. It wasn't long before I joined a guild, a group of players who banded together to complete quests and battle other players. That's where I met Kalen. Kalen was the leader of the guild, a charismatic and skilled player. His character, a noble knight, was always at the forefront of every battle, protecting his allies and dealing devastating blows to the enemy. He was everything I wasn't, confident, decisive, and admired by everyone in the guild. We started talking in the game's chat channels, strategizing for battles, and sharing tips. Gradually, our conversations became more personal. We talked about our lives outside the game, our hopes and dreams, our fears and insecurities. Kalen told me he was a medical student, studying hard to become a doctor. He described his demanding schedule, his passion for helping people, and his love for his family. He seemed like the perfect guy, intelligent, compassionate, and driven. The more we talked, the more I fell for him. It was a different kind of connection than I'd ever experienced before. We understood each other on a deep level, sharing a sense of humor and a shared worldview. I knew it was just a game, but the feelings were real. He asked me to move our conversations to a private messaging app, saying he preferred the interface. I didn't hesitate. We exchanged numbers and started texting and calling each other regularly. His voice was even more charming than I'd imagined. We talked for hours every night, losing track of time as we shared our thoughts and feelings. One day, Kaylin sent me a picture. It was a selfie of him in a hospital setting, wearing scrubs and a stethoscope. He had dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a handsome, chiseled jawline. He looked exactly like the kind of guy I'd always dreamed of being with. I was smitten. We started planning a date. He lived in another state, a few hours away, but he said he was willing to drive to meet me. I was ecstatic. I spent weeks agonizing over what to wear, how to do my hair, and what to say. I wanted everything to be perfect. The day of our date arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I waited for him at the designated meeting spot, a coffee shop in my town. I checked my phone every few minutes, refreshing the messaging app. An hour passed. Then 2. He never showed up. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I sent him text messages, but he didn't respond. I was devastated. I couldn't understand what had happened. Had he changed his mind? Had something happened to him? I spent the next few days in a state of confusion and heartbreak. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. Then, a week later, I received a message from Kaylin. He apologized profusely for missing our date, claiming he'd had a medical emergency. A patient had come into the hospital in critical condition, and he'd had to stay and assist with the surgery. He said he tried to call, but his phone had died. I was skeptical, but I wanted to believe him. I missed him terribly, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. So I forgave him. We rescheduled our date, and this time, he promised he wouldn't let me down. The same thing happened again. He stood me up, claiming another medical emergency. This time I was furious. I confronted him, accusing him of lying to me. He denied it vehemently, insisting that he was telling the truth. He sent me pictures of himself in the hospital again, looking exhausted and stressed. He begged me to trust him, to give him another chance. Again, I gave in. I wanted so badly for this to be real, for him to be the person I thought he was. This cycle of broken promises and tearful apologies continued for months. He'd plan a date, stand me up, offer some elaborate excuse, and then beg for forgiveness. Each time, I became more suspicious, but I couldn't bring myself to end things. I was too invested, too emotionally attached. Then one day, I decided to do some digging. I started with a simple reverse image search of the pictures he'd sent me. The results were shocking. The pictures weren't of him at all. They were of a male model, whose images were readily available online. I confronted him with my findings, sending him the links to the model's website and social media accounts. He didn't respond. I called him repeatedly, but he wouldn't answer. Finally, after hours of silence, he sent me a single message. "I'm sorry." That was it. No explanation, no justification, just a simple apology. I was heartbroken, but also relieved. The truth was finally out. I had been catfished. I blocked him on all platforms and tried to move on with my life. But the experience had left a deep scar. I felt foolish, naive, and betrayed. I couldn't believe I had fallen for such an obvious scam. But the worst part was the realization that the person I had fallen in love with never existed. The Kaylin I had known was a figment of my imagination, a carefully constructed persona designed to manipulate and deceive me. But here's the part I'm most ashamed of, the part I've never told anyone. After the Kaylin facade was shattered, after the apologies and the blocking, a new message appeared. This time, it wasn't from a nightly doctor. It was from Sarah, a shy, artistic woman who confessed to creating the Kaylin persona. Sarah explained that she was insecure and lonely, and had used a fake profile to connect with people online. She said she'd never intended to hurt me, and that she'd actually fallen in love with me too, while pretending to be Kaylin. At first, I was furious. How dare she try to manipulate me again? But then, something unexpected happened. I started talking to Sarah. I needed answers. I needed to understand why she had done what she did. And surprisingly, I found myself connecting with her. Sarah was nothing like Kaylin. She was quiet, introspective, and deeply insecure. But she was also kind, intelligent, and creative. We talked for hours about her life, her struggles, and her regrets. She told me about her own feelings of loneliness and isolation, her longing for connection, and her fear of rejection. As I listened to her, I started to see her as a person, not just as the catfish who had deceived me. And I realized that I was still drawn to the person behind the screen, even if that person wasn't who I'd initially thought. Against my better judgment, I started to develop feelings for Sarah. The connection we had forged as Kaylin hadn't completely disappeared. It had simply shifted to a new, albeit more complicated form. We continued talking for months, building a new relationship based on honesty and vulnerability. I even started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make it work. Then, one day, Sarah confessed something that shattered everything. The truth is, she wasn't entirely honest with me about her intentions. She admitted that she had initially created the Kaylin persona with the intention of scamming people out of money. She had researched common online scams and decided that a romantic catfish scheme would be the most effective. She had targeted me because I seemed vulnerable and lonely, and she had planned to eventually ask me for financial help. But then, she said, she had actually fallen in love with me, and she couldn't go through with the scam. She felt guilty about what she had done, and she wanted to come clean. I was devastated. Not only had I been catfished, but I had also been targeted for a financial scam. The person I had started to care for was a con artist who had initially intended to steal my money. I ended all contact with her immediately. I blocked her on all platforms and vowed to never speak to her again. But the damage was done. I had been emotionally manipulated and betrayed in the worst possible way. And the shame of falling for it, not once but twice, continues to haunt me to this day. The whole thing makes me sick. I was so eager for a connection that I ignored every red flag, every warning sign. I allowed myself to be fooled, not just by a fake persona, but by a genuine predator. And the worst part is, a part of me still wonders what could have been if things had been different. If Sarah had been honest from the beginning, if she hadn't tried to manipulate me, could we have actually had a real relationship? It's a question that I'll probably never have the answer to. And it's a question that I'll continue to ask myself every time I think about the catfish who stole my heart and shattered my trust. I've never told anyone this. I'm too ashamed. Maybe writing it down will help me finally start to move on. Okay, here it is. My true, messed up catfish love story. It's not a confession I'm proud of, but it's the truth. It started, like so many bad decisions do, with boredom. I was in my early 20s, stuck in a dead-end job in my hometown after college. All my friends had moved away, chasing careers and exciting lives, and I was folding sweaters at a department store, watching my life tick by in painfully slow motion. I was lonely, and I was craving something, anything, to break the monotony. So, I did what any rational, bored person would do. I created a fake online persona. I wasn't trying to scam anyone out of money or anything like that. I just wanted some attention, some connection. I wanted to be someone else, someone more interesting than the girl folding sweaters in Ohio. I named her Serafina, a name I'd always loved but never felt I could pull off. I created a backstory for her, aspiring artist living in New York City, struggling to make ends meet but passionate about her craft. I scoured the internet for photos, carefully curating a profile that was both believable and appealing. Serafina was beautiful, artsy, and just a little bit mysterious. I joined a few online art communities and started posting Serafina's work, which was really just stuff I found on Tumblr and attributed to her. People started noticing. They liked her paintings, commented on her unique style, and followed her account. It was exhilarating. I was getting the validation and attention I craved, even if it was all based on a lie. Then I met him. His name was Liam, and he was a musician. He stumbled across Serafina's profile on one of the art forums and sent her a message, complimenting her work and asking about her artistic process. I was immediately drawn to him. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely interested in Serafina's art. We started messaging each other regularly, then moved to email, and eventually, to video calls. I know. Video calls were a terrible idea. But by that point, I was completely hooked. I couldn't bring myself to end the charade. So, I used a combination of carefully angled lighting, filters, and pre-recorded videos to create the illusion of Serafina. I'd find clips of girls who looked similar to the photos I was using, girls with the same hair color and general features, and play them during the calls, pretending it was just me having bad internet. Liam never seemed to notice anything was off. Or maybe he did, and he was just too kind to say anything. Over time, Liam and I developed a real connection. We talked about everything. Our dreams, our fears, our families, our favorite books and movies. I found myself falling for him hard. He was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. Kind, compassionate, funny, and incredibly talented. The problem, of course, was that he was falling for Serafina, not me. The guilt was crushing me. I knew I had to tell him the truth, but I was terrified of losing him. I convinced myself that if I could just meet him in person, I could explain everything and he would understand. So, I did something even more insane. I planned a trip to meet Liam in New York City. I told him Serafina was finally coming to town for an art show and wanted to meet him in person. He was thrilled. I spent weeks preparing for the trip, agonizing over what to say, how to explain my lies, and how to convince him that the real me was worthy of his love. I even started taking art classes, hoping to develop some actual artistic skills to justify Serafina's talent. The day I arrived in New York, I was a nervous wreck. I checked into my hotel, rehearsed my confession in the mirror 100 times, and tried to calm myself down. I had arranged to meet Liam at a small coffee shop in Greenwich Village. As I walked toward the coffee shop, my heart was pounding in my chest. I spotted him through the window, sitting at a table, looking even more handsome than he did in his photos. I took a deep breath and walked inside. As soon as he saw me, his face lit up. He stood up and gave me a hug, and for a moment, I forgot all about the lies and the guilt. I just wanted to be with him. But then, he pulled back and looked at me more closely. "Serafina," he asked, his brow furrowed. "You look different than I expected." That was my cue. It was time to tell the truth. But I choked. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I launched into a convoluted explanation about how the photos online were old, how I'd gained some weight, how the lighting was bad in the coffee shop. Liam looked confused, but he didn't press the issue. We spent the next few hours talking, but I could feel a distance between us. He kept glancing at me, as if he was trying to figure something out. I knew he suspected something was wrong. The next day, Liam called me. "Serafina," he said, his voice hesitant. "I need to be honest with you. I did some digging online. I found your photos on a stock photo website, and I found the art you've been posting on Tumblr. It's not yours, is it?" I couldn't lie anymore. The jig was up. I burst into tears and confessed everything. I told him about my boring life, my loneliness, my need for attention, and how I created Serafina as an escape. I told him how I'd fallen in love with him, and how terrified I was of losing him. There was silence on the other end of the line for what felt like an eternity. Then Liam spoke. "I don't understand," he said, his voice quiet. "Why would you do this? Why would you lie to me about everything?" I tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled and incoherent. I told him how much he meant to me, how I never meant to hurt him, and how I was truly sorry. "I need some time to think," he said finally. "I'll call you later." I spent the rest of the day in my hotel room, waiting for his call. It never came. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel and flew back home, feeling like the biggest fool on earth. I never heard from Liam again. I tried to contact him, but he blocked my number and deleted his social media accounts. It's been years since that disastrous trip to New York, but the guilt still haunts me. I know what I did was wrong, deeply wrong. I hurt Liam. I betrayed his trust, and I ruined any chance of a real relationship with him. I often wonder what would have happened if I'd been honest from the beginning. Maybe he wouldn't have been interested in the real me, but at least I wouldn't have caused him so much pain. I've grown a lot since then. I got a new job, moved to a new city, and started therapy to deal with my issues with self-esteem and loneliness. I even started taking art classes for real and discovered that I actually enjoy it. But I'll never forget Liam or the mess I made of our relationship. It's a constant reminder of the importance of honesty, integrity, and being true to yourself, even when it's hard. And it's a confession I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. The worst part, sometimes, late at night, I still find myself scrolling through old messages, rereading our conversations, and wondering what could have been if I had just been brave enough to be myself from the start. I destroyed something beautiful because I was too afraid to believe I was worthy of it. And that's a truth that stings more than anything else. I was in a really lonely place in my life, fresh out of a bad breakup, feeling like everyone else was moving on while I was stuck in neutral. I spent way too much time online, scrolling through social media, feeling envious of all the seemingly perfect relationships I saw. One night, I stumbled upon this profile on a dating site. "Sarah," it said. The pictures were stunning. Long, flowing blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, a smile that could light up a room. She described herself as a free spirit, someone who loved hiking, reading, and deep conversations. Basically, my ideal woman. I sent her a message, not really expecting anything. To my surprise, she replied almost immediately. We started chatting, and I was instantly hooked. She was witty, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked for hours every night, about everything and nothing. I found myself looking forward to her messages more than anything else. After a week, we started exchanging photos. She sent me more of herself, all equally gorgeous. I sent her some too, carefully curated to show me in the best possible light. After a month of intense online flirting, we decided to video chat. That's when the panic set in. I knew I couldn't go through with it. The person in my profile pictures wasn't really me. I'd used older photos, ones where I was thinner, had more hair, and generally looked better. I hadn't intentionally set out to deceive her, but somewhere along the way, the truth had gotten blurred. I made up an excuse about my camera being broken and suggested we just stick to texting for now. She seemed disappointed but understanding. The truth is, I had gained a lot of weight after the breakup. I was insecure about my appearance, and the idea of her seeing me as I was now terrified me. I know it was wrong, but I started looking for other pictures online, images of someone who looked closer to the photos I had used on my profile. I found this woman, Emily, who was a travel blogger. Her Instagram was full of beautiful photos of her in exotic locations. I started using some of her pictures as my own, sending them to Sarah, pretending they were me on my adventures. The more I lied, the deeper I got. I created this whole fake persona, this idealized version of myself that I thought Sarah wanted. I told her I was a freelance photographer, traveling the world, capturing stunning landscapes. I even started researching photography in different countries, so I could sound convincing. Sarah was falling for it. Hook, line, and sinker. She told me she was falling in love with me. I knew it was wrong, so incredibly wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I was addicted to the attention, to the feeling of being desired by someone so beautiful and seemingly perfect. I told myself that once I lost some weight and felt better about myself, I would come clean and reveal the truth. But the weight didn't magically disappear, and the truth became harder and harder to tell. Months went by. We were practically in a virtual relationship. We talked every day, shared our hopes and dreams, and even made plans to meet in person. I kept putting it off, making excuses about my travel schedule, knowing that the longer I waited, the more painful the reveal would be. Then, one day, Sarah told me she had a surprise for me. She was coming to visit me. She'd booked a flight to my city and would be arriving in a week. Panic doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. I knew I had to tell her the truth, but I was terrified of losing her. I imagined her reaction, the hurt and anger in her eyes. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I doubled down on the lie. I told her I was out of the country on assignment and wouldn't be back for at least a month. She was disappointed but said she understood. We agreed to postpone our meeting. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of me, taken from my social media, side by side with one of Emily, the travel blogger. The message read, "I know who you really are." My blood ran cold. Someone had figured out my secret. I didn't know who it was or how they knew, but they had me cornered. I tried to ignore the message, hoping it was just a prank. But then the messages started coming more frequently, each one more threatening than the last. They demanded money, threatening to expose me to Sarah if I didn't pay up. I was trapped. I didn't have much money, but I scraped together everything I could and sent it to them, hoping they would leave me alone. They didn't. They kept demanding more, and I kept paying, desperate to protect my secret. I was living in constant fear, terrified that Sarah would find out the truth and that my life would be ruined. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. The blackmail, the lies, the guilt, it was all too much. I decided to come clean. I wrote Sarah a long, heartfelt email, pouring out my soul and confessing everything. I told her about the insecurities, the fake photos, the lies about my identity. I explained why I had done it, how I had gotten caught up in the fantasy, and how deeply sorry I was. I didn't expect her to forgive me, but I needed her to know the truth. I hit send and waited, bracing myself for the inevitable explosion. The reply came a few hours later. It was short and to the point. "I know." My heart sank. She already knew. The blackmailer had gotten to her first. I braced myself for the torrent of anger and disappointment, but it never came. Instead, she wrote, "I've known for a while. I just wanted to see how long you would keep it up." I was stunned. How could she have known? She explained that she had reverse image, searched one of the photos I had sent her, and discovered the travel blogger. She had confronted me about it indirectly, dropping hints to see if I would come clean. When I didn't, she decided to play along, to see how far I would go. The whole time, she knew I was a fraud. But she stayed. She kept talking to me. I asked her why. She said she saw something in me, a vulnerability and a genuine desire for connection that she couldn't ignore. She knew I was insecure and lonely, and she felt sorry for me. She also admitted that Sarah wasn't entirely real either. The pictures she had used were heavily filtered and edited. She wasn't really a free spirit traveling the world. She worked as an accountant in a small town and spent most of her free time watching Netflix. We had both created these idealized versions of ourselves, hiding behind screens and filters. In a weird way, it was almost a relief. The truth was out, and it wasn't as catastrophic as I had imagined. We started talking honestly, without the pretense. We shared our real selves, our flaws and insecurities, our hopes and fears. It was scary, but also incredibly liberating. We decided to meet in person, not as Sarah and the freelance photographer, but as ourselves. It was awkward at first, but we quickly realized that we had a genuine connection, even without the filters and the lies. We started dating, for real this time. It wasn't always easy. There were trust issues to overcome, and we had to work hard to build a relationship based on honesty and vulnerability. But we did it. We learned to accept each other, flaws and all. We even laughed about the whole catfish incident, acknowledging how crazy and messed up it was. We've been together for 3 years now. We're not perfect, but we're real. And that's what matters. I still cringe when I think about what I did, the lies I told, and the pain I caused. But I also know that it led me to something real, something genuine, something I never would have found if I hadn't taken that first step down the path of deception. It's a strange and twisted love story, but it's ours. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I still haven't told many people about this, because it's embarrassing and shameful. But now, at least, it's out there. Maybe someone else will read this and realize that even the biggest mistakes can lead to unexpected places. The truth I've been carrying around, twisting in my gut for nearly a decade. It's a catfish story, a love story of sorts, but twisted and warped by my own insecurities, and, well, you'll see. It started like so many online romances do, with a random friend request on a platform that barely exists anymore. Think early Facebook, before it was all curated feeds and political rants. I was 19, awkward, and spending my summer glued to my computer in my parents' basement. This girl, Sarah, added me. Her profile picture was a little blurry, but she was pretty, long, dark hair, big eyes, the kind of girl I wouldn't have dared to approach in real life. We started chatting, and she was amazing. Funny, smart, liked all the same obscure bands I did. She lived in another state, which felt safe. No chance of running into her at the grocery store and having my awkwardness exposed. We talked for hours every day, sharing everything, our dreams, our fears, the embarrassing moments we tried to forget. It was intoxicating. For the first time, I felt like someone truly saw me, understood me. The only catch, Sarah never wanted to video chat or talk on the phone. She always had an excuse: bad internet, a broken microphone, stage fright. I was naive. But even then, a little voice in the back of my head whispered that something wasn't right. But I ignored it. I wanted to believe so badly that this beautiful, intelligent girl was actually interested in me. So I rationalized it. Maybe she was just shy. Maybe she was insecure about her appearance. I convinced myself that as long as we had our connection, the lack of physical presence didn't matter. We dated online for almost a year. We sent each other virtual gifts, wrote each other love poems, even planned a future together. A little cottage by the sea where we'd raise rescue dogs and write novels. It was ridiculous, I know, but I was completely caught up in the fantasy. Then one day, Sarah told me she was coming to my state to visit a family member and wanted to meet up. I was ecstatic and terrified. This was it, the moment of truth. I spent weeks agonizing over what to wear, what to say, how to act. I wanted to be perfect for her, to live up to the image she had in her head. The day arrived, and I drove to the coffee shop where we had agreed to meet, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I got there early, scanned the crowd, and waited. And waited. An hour passed, then two. Sarah never showed. I tried calling and texting, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I sat there, humiliated and heartbroken, until the coffee shop closed. On the drive home, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been catfished. Someone had been using Sarah's pictures and words to build a fake relationship with me. I was angry, but mostly I was devastated. The person I had fallen in love with didn't exist. The connection we had shared was a lie. I spent the next few days wallowing in self-pity, replaying every conversation, searching for clues I had missed. And then, something strange happened. I started thinking about the person behind the Sarah profile. Who were they? What did they want? Why did they spend so much time pretending to be someone else? An idea started to form in my mind. A crazy, reckless idea. I knew Sarah's name, or at least the name on the profile. I did some digging, found her picture online, and then I created a fake profile using her images. I wasn't trying to catfish anyone else, not exactly. I wanted to find the person who had catfished me and confront them. The profile I made was simple. I used Sarah's picture, but I changed the name to Michael and created a vague bio about being a writer looking for connection. It didn't take long. A few days after setting up the profile, I got a message. Sarah messaged Michael. My heart pounded as I read the message. It was the same tone, the same humor, the same way of expressing herself that I had fallen in love with. I played along, pretending to be Michael, the writer. We started chatting, and I slowly began to steer the conversation towards Sarah. I asked about her interests, her life, her past relationships. I wanted to know why she had created the fake profile, why she had targeted me. It took weeks, but eventually, she started to open up. She told me she was lonely, insecure, and had always struggled with her appearance. She said she created the Sarah profile as a way to escape her own life, to connect with people without having to reveal her true self. She admitted that she knew what she was doing was wrong, but she couldn't stop. She had become addicted to the attention, the validation, the fantasy of being someone else. And then, she told me her real name, Emily. Emily was nothing like the Sarah I had imagined. She was overweight, had acne, and wore glasses. She was also incredibly intelligent, creative, and deeply insecure. We talked for hours, not as Sarah and Michael, but as myself and Emily. I told her how hurt I had been, how betrayed I felt. But I also told her that I understood, that I had been lonely and insecure myself. Something shifted in our conversation. The pretense fell away, and we started connecting on a deeper level. We talked about our insecurities, our fears, our hopes for the future. And then I confessed. I told her that I knew she was Sarah, that I had created the Michael profile to find her. There was silence on the other end for a long time. I thought she would block me, disappear completely. But then she responded. She said she wasn't surprised. She had suspected something was up. And then she asked me to meet her, in person. I hesitated. Part of me was still angry, still hurt, but another part of me was curious. I wanted to see Emily, the real person behind the Sarah profile. So I agreed. We met at a park halfway between our towns. When I saw her, I was surprised. Not by her appearance. I had already seen her picture. But by her vulnerability. She was nervous, fidgety, and avoided eye contact. We sat on a bench and talked for hours. We talked about everything, the catfish, the lies, the hurt, the connection. And something unexpected happened. I started to fall for her. Not for the fake Sarah, but for the real Emily. I saw her intelligence, her creativity, her kindness. I saw the pain and insecurity that had driven her to create the Sarah profile. And I realized that I had been just as lonely and insecure as she was. Over the next few months, we continued to talk, to meet up, to get to know each other. We built a real relationship, based on honesty and vulnerability. We helped each other overcome our insecurities, embrace our true selves. And eventually, we fell in love. We dated for several years, and it was the most intense, most fulfilling relationship of my life. We understood each other in a way that no one else ever had. We had both been damaged, broken, and lonely, and we had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. But here's the confession, the part I've never told anyone. I knew Emily was Sarah when I created the fake profile. I'd found out before I messaged her. That whole story about me discovering it after weeks of talking to her as Michael? A lie. I created that fake profile and sought her out, already knowing she was the one who'd catfished me. I set it all up. I wanted to see if I could make her love me, the real me, not the idealized version she had created in her head. I wanted to prove that I was worthy of her affection. And I did. We both did. We built something real from a foundation of lies. We loved each other deeply. We were happy. But the guilt has always been there, nagging at me. Emily died a few years ago in a car accident. It was sudden, unexpected, and it shattered my world. I miss her every day, and I can't help but wonder if our relationship was ever truly real. Was she ever really in love with me? Or was she just in love with the idea of me? Did she ever fully forgive me for the deception? And did I ever truly forgive her? I don't know the answers to those questions. All I know is that I loved her, and I miss her terribly, and that I'll always carry the weight of this secret with me. The catfish love story that started with a lie and ended with a tragedy. I'm doing this because I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, the one I used to create, the one I projected onto the world, the one I used to lure him in. I need to confess, to own up to the fact that I was a catfish. Not just any catfish, but the kind who spun a web of lies so intricate, so convincing, that it irrevocably altered someone's life. His name was Ethan. I found him in a gaming forum, a place where I usually lurked, observing, creating elaborate backstories for the characters I played online. I was lonely, perpetually online, and craving connection. Ethan was kind, funny, and disarmingly genuine in his posts. He talked about his love for classic literature, his struggles with anxiety, and his dreams of becoming a wildlife photographer. There was a vulnerability in his writing that resonated with me, a longing for something real that mirrored my own. But I was insecure, terrified of revealing my true self. I was overweight, struggled with acne, and lacked the confidence to put myself out there in the real world. So I created Ava. Ava was everything I wasn't, effortlessly beautiful, adventurous, and seemingly fearless. I stole photos from an Instagram account of a travel blogger, carefully curating a profile that showcased a life of exotic adventures and breathtaking landscapes. I crafted a personality for Ava that was a blend of my own desires and the qualities I admired in others. She was witty, intelligent, and passionate about art and nature. Ethan fell for her immediately. We started messaging privately, spending hours talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his day, his hopes, his fears. I listened intently, responding with empathy and understanding, weaving my fabricated persona into the fabric of his life. As weeks turned into months, our connection deepened. We shared intimate details about our pasts, our dreams for the future. I told him about Ava's traumatic childhood, her struggles with self-esteem, carefully crafting a narrative that would elicit his sympathy and affection. He, in turn, opened up about his own insecurities, his anxieties about finding love, his fear of being alone. The more he revealed, the more entrenched I became in my lie. I knew it was wrong, that I was hurting him, but I couldn't stop myself. His attention was intoxicating, his affection validating. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, desired, loved. But it was all built on a foundation of lies. The guilt gnawed at me constantly. I'd lie awake at night, consumed by remorse, knowing that I was deceiving someone who deserved honesty and respect. I considered confessing countless times, but the fear of losing him always held me back. I convinced myself that if I just waited long enough, I could find a way to transition from Ava to my real self, that he would somehow understand and accept me. That was a delusion, of course, a desperate attempt to justify my actions and avoid the inevitable consequences. The inevitable arrived in the form of a job offer. Ethan had been working as a freelance web designer, struggling to make ends meet. One day, he told me about a dream job he'd applied for at a wildlife photography magazine. He was hesitant, afraid of getting his hopes up, but I encouraged him to pursue it with all his heart. A few weeks later, he called me, his voice trembling with excitement. He'd gotten the job. It was a huge opportunity, a chance to finally pursue his passion and build a stable career. He was ecstatic, and I was genuinely happy for him. But there was a catch. The job was located in another country, thousands of miles away from where we both lived. He was torn. He didn't want to leave me, but he also knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I told him to go. I told him that Ava would always support his dreams, even if it meant being apart for a while. I told him that we could make long distance work, that our love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. It was the ultimate act of selfishness. I knew that a long-distance relationship with a fictional person was doomed to fail, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him, of shattering the illusion I had so carefully constructed. He moved abroad a month later. We continued to communicate online, but the distance created a chasm between us. The time zone difference made it difficult to sync our schedules. He was busy with his new job, and I was consumed by guilt and anxiety. The photos he sent from his travels were breathtaking, but they also served as a constant reminder of my deception. He was living the life that Ava should have been living, and I was stuck behind a computer screen, trapped in my own web of lies. Slowly but surely, our communication dwindled. He started responding to my messages less frequently, his emails becoming shorter and more impersonal. I knew that he was drifting away, that the illusion was fading. Then one day, I received an email from him that changed everything. He'd met someone, a woman who worked at the magazine, a fellow photographer who shared his passion for wildlife. He said that he hadn't been looking for a relationship, but that he couldn't deny the connection he felt with her. He told me that he still cared about Ava, but that he couldn't continue to live a lie. He needed something real, something tangible. He ended the email by saying that he understood if I never wanted to speak to him again. He was right. I didn't want to speak to him again. Not because I was angry or resentful, but because I was ashamed. I was ashamed of what I had done, of the pain I had caused him, of the lies I had told. I deleted the Ava profile, erased all traces of her existence from the internet. I cut off all contact with Ethan, disappearing into the anonymity of the online world. For years, I tried to forget about him, to bury the guilt and move on with my life. I lost weight, started taking care of my skin, and even ventured out into the real world, determined to build a life that was authentic and fulfilling. I made friends, pursued my passions, and even started dating. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living a lie. The shadow of Ava haunted me, a constant reminder of the damage I had inflicted on someone who had only shown me kindness and compassion. I know that nothing I can do will ever undo what I did to Ethan. I stole his time, his trust, and his heart. I manipulated him for my own selfish desires, and I left him with nothing but a broken heart and a shattered illusion. But I hope that by confessing, by owning up to my actions, I can at least begin to heal myself. I hope that one day, Ethan will find happiness and peace, and that he will be able to forgive me for the pain I caused him. I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I hope that he can find it in his heart to give it to me anyway. As for me, I will continue to live with the knowledge of what I did, using it as a constant reminder to be honest, authentic, and kind in all my interactions with others. The guilt may never fully disappear, but I will carry it as a burden, a penance for my sins, and a motivation to be a better person. Maybe, just maybe, one day I can finally forgive myself. I need to tell someone, anyone, about this. It's about something that happened online, a catfish love story, as you put it. But it's so much messier and more twisted than anything I've ever heard or read about. And the worst part, I was the catfish. Not entirely, maybe, but enough to make me feel like a monster. It started, like most things do these days, with boredom and a need for connection. I was in a dead-end job, working as a data entry clerk for a medical billing company. My days were spent staring at spreadsheets, and my nights were spent scrolling through social media, feeling increasingly isolated and invisible. I was average, completely unremarkable in every way. Average looks, average intelligence, average personality. I longed to be someone else, someone more interesting, someone who attracted attention and admiration. That's when I stumbled upon this online forum dedicated to a niche hobby, collecting and restoring vintage cameras. I'd always had a passing interest in photography, mostly taking snapshots with my phone, but the craftsmanship and history behind these old cameras fascinated me. I started lurking in the forum, reading the posts, admiring the photos, and slowly, I began to participate. I created a profile using a slightly altered version of my name, Alex R., instead of Alexandra. I didn't use my own picture. Instead, I found a photo online of a guy who I thought was incredibly handsome, rugged, with kind eyes and a charming smile. I told myself it was just to protect my privacy, but deep down, I knew I was creating a fantasy version of myself. In the beginning, it was harmless. I asked questions, shared my limited knowledge, and posted pictures of the few cameras I'd managed to acquire. But then, I started getting private messages. People complimented my knowledge, my taste, and inevitably, my handsome photo. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Sarah. She was also a vintage camera enthusiast, and her posts were intelligent and insightful. We started chatting regularly, first about cameras, then about our lives. She was a writer, working on a novel, and she had this amazing way of describing the world, painting vivid pictures with her words. I was captivated. As Alex, I was witty, confident, and passionate. I shared my fabricated adventures, my exaggerated opinions, and my completely made-up dreams. I became the person I always wanted to be, hiding behind a stolen face and a carefully constructed persona. Sarah fell for it hard, and so did I. I fell for her too, for her intelligence, her humor, her vulnerability, for the way she made me feel seen, even though she was only seeing a mirage. We talked for hours every day, sharing our hopes, our fears, and our deepest secrets. She told me about her struggles with writer's block, her complicated family relationships, and her dreams of becoming a published author. I listened, truly listened, and offered support and encouragement. I felt like I was genuinely helping her, even though it was all based on a lie. The online relationship intensified quickly. We started calling each other, staying up late into the night, talking about everything and nothing. Her voice was even more enchanting than her writing. She had this soft, melodic tone that made my heart ache. We made plans to meet in person. I knew I couldn't go through with it, but I kept stringing her along, telling her I was traveling for work, that I had a family emergency, anything to postpone the inevitable. The guilt was crushing me. I knew I was hurting her, but I couldn't bring myself to end it. I was addicted to the attention, the validation, the feeling of being loved, and I was terrified of losing her. Then, one day, Sarah told me she was coming to my city for a writer's conference. She insisted on meeting, saying she couldn't wait any longer to see me in person. I was trapped. I tried to dissuade her, to come up with another excuse, but she wouldn't budge. She said she needed to meet me, that our connection was too strong to ignore. Desperate, I decided to come clean. I wrote her a long, heartfelt message, pouring out my soul and confessing everything. I told her about my insecurities, my need for validation, and the lies I'd told to create Alex. I included my real photo, my real name, and my real contact information. I begged her to understand, to forgive me, and to give me a chance to prove that the real me was worthy of her affection. Then I waited. The silence was deafening. Hours turned into days, and still no response. I checked my email, my phone, my social media accounts obsessively, hoping for some sign that she had read my message. Finally, after 3 agonizing days, she replied. Her message was short and cold. She said she was disgusted by my deception, that she couldn't believe I could be so cruel and manipulative. She said she never wanted to hear from me again. I was devastated. I had lost her, and I deserved it. I spent weeks, months even, wallowing in self-pity and regret. I deleted my Alexa profile, purged all traces of my online persona, and retreated back into my shell. But the guilt wouldn't let me go. I knew I had to do something, anything, to make amends. So I did some research. I found out where Sarah lived, where she worked, and what her book was about. And then, I started helping her anonymously. I contacted literary agents and publishers, singing her praises and highlighting the unique qualities of her writing. I created a website dedicated to her work, showcasing her short stories and essays. I even donated money to a writing scholarship in her name. I never revealed myself as the source of these acts of kindness. I knew she would never forgive me, and I didn't want to taint her success with my presence. I just wanted to help her achieve her dreams, even if it meant staying hidden in the shadows. Years have passed since then. Sarah's book was published and became a bestseller. She's now a successful author, traveling the world and inspiring readers with her words. I still follow her career from afar, feeling a mixture of pride and shame. I'm proud of her accomplishments, but I'm ashamed of the role I played in her journey. I know I can never truly make up for what I did. The damage is done, and the trust is broken. But I hope that, in some small way, my anonymous acts of kindness have helped to heal the wounds I inflicted. I'm still living with the guilt, the regret, and the knowledge that I am capable of such deception. I've tried to learn from my mistakes, to to be a better person, to be honest and authentic in my relationships. But the shadow of Alexar will always be a part of me, a constant reminder of the pain I caused and the person I never want to be again. I don't know if this confession will make me feel any better, but at least I've finally told someone the truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's a start. It's a long and complicated story, and it still hurts to think about it. Thanks for listening. Well, reading. Okay, here goes nothing. I've been living a lie online for almost a decade, and it's time the truth came out. This isn't just about some harmless photoshopping or a slightly inflated dating profile. This is about creating an entirely fake persona and stringing someone along for years, someone who deserves so much better than what I gave them. It all started when I was 16. I was awkward, insecure, and painfully shy. High school was a social minefield I navigated with as much grace as a newborn giraffe. I was overweight, plagued with acne, and convinced that no one would ever be interested in me romantically. So, I retreated into the internet. It was a place where I could be whoever I wanted to be, without the judgment and insecurities that plague my real life. I stumbled upon a photo of this girl online, a model from some obscure European website. She was stunning, long, flowing blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. On a whim, I created a fake profile using her pictures. I called myself Sarah, and I meticulously crafted a backstory. A small-town girl with big dreams, an aspiring artist with a love for indie music and old movies. The details were generic enough to be believable, but specific enough to create a sense of personality. I started joining online forums and chat rooms, connecting with people who shared my interests. And then I met him. His name was Mark. He was funny, intelligent, and incredibly kind. We bonded over our shared love of books, our cynical views on pop culture, and our mutual disdain for small talk. He lived in a different state, which, at the time, felt like a safety net. I could pretend to be someone else without the fear of bumping into him at the local grocery store. Our conversation started as casual exchanges, but quickly evolved into something deeper. We talked every day, sharing our hopes, our fears, and our dreams for the future. I crafted elaborate stories about my life as Sarah, drawing inspiration from movies, books, and my own imagination. I became a master of deception, weaving a web of lies so intricate that even I sometimes struggled to keep track of them. As the months turned into years, my feelings for Mark grew stronger. I knew it was wrong, that I was living a fantasy built on a foundation of lies. But I couldn't bring myself to end it. He was the only person who had ever truly seen me, or at least, the person I pretended to be. He loved Sarah, and I desperately craved that love. I told myself that one day, I would come clean, that I would reveal the truth and hope that he could forgive me. But the longer I waited, the harder it became. The fear of losing him outweighed the guilt, and I continued to perpetuate the lie. We made plans to meet in person, promises we both knew I could never keep. I always had an excuse, a family emergency, a last-minute trip, a sudden illness. Mark was incredibly understanding, always offering his support and assuring me that we would meet eventually. His unwavering patience only made my guilt worse. As I got older, the fantasy started to feel more and more suffocating. I watched my real life pass me by while I lived vicariously through this fake online persona. I graduated high school, went to college, and started a career, all while maintaining the elaborate fiction of Sarah. I met people in real life, formed friendships, even went on a few dates, but I always held back, knowing that I couldn't fully commit to anyone as long as I was living this double life. The lie had become a prison, trapping me in a cycle of deception and regret. About 3 years ago, Mark started talking about marriage. He said he couldn't imagine spending his life with anyone else, that Sarah was his soulmate. My heart sank. I knew I couldn't let him propose, couldn't let him build a future based on a lie. I considered ghosting him, simply disappearing from his life without explanation. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. He deserved more than that. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I confessed. I wrote him a long, rambling email, pouring out my heart and revealing the truth about my identity. I told him about the fake profile, the stolen pictures, the years of deception. I explained my insecurities, my fears, and my desperate need for connection. I braced myself for his anger, his disappointment, his rejection. And then I waited. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing. I checked my email obsessively, hoping for some sign of forgiveness, some indication that he hadn't completely written me off. But there was only silence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I received a response. It was short and to the point. He said he was hurt, betrayed, and confused. He needed time to process everything, and he didn't know if he could ever forgive me. I understood. I knew I had broken his trust, and that it would take time, if ever, to rebuild it. We started talking again, tentatively at first, then with increasing frequency. He asked me a lot of questions, trying to understand my motivations and the reasons behind my deception. I answered as honestly as I could, laying bare my vulnerabilities and owning up to my mistakes. He was surprisingly understanding, even compassionate. He said he still cared about me, but that he needed to meet me in person, to see if the person behind the fake profile was someone he could actually love. That was 2 years ago. We've been talking online ever since. I've sent him recent pictures of myself, and we video chatted a few times. He knows what I really look like, what my real name is, what my actual life is like. He says he's still attracted to me, that he still sees the qualities he fell in love with in the real me. We're planning to meet in person next month. I'm terrified. I'm afraid that the connection we built online won't translate into real life, that he'll be disappointed when he finally sees me face to face. I'm afraid that I'll never be able to fully make up for the damage I've caused, that the shadow of my deception will always linger between us. But I also know that I owe it to him to try. He deserves the truth. He deserves a real relationship, and he deserves to know if there's a future for us beyond the screen. So, I'm taking a leap of faith. I'm putting myself out there, vulnerable and exposed, hoping that he can see past my mistakes and see the person I am today. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll end up together, or if this is just a temporary reprieve from the consequences of my actions. But I do know that I'm finally being honest, and that's a start. I had to be honest with everyone, and Mark, this is my confession. This is my truth.